Pookie Dookie's second album is your favorite?
Run it. I rock, I roll, I bloom, I grow.
Tyler, the Creator, has had quite the career. While some of his albums are some of the most praised of the decade, others are looked back at being a little too focused on shock value and honestly not all too good. But to just straight up dismiss Tyler's early work would be a disservice. There are certainly gems on every single one of his albums. So I once again got to thinking, how can I rank every single Tyler the Creator song and look at it objectively? I really wonder if there's any sort of way I could take a look into this. Any way at all. On a more serious note, thank you all for the massive support on the last video in this series. That video was a ton of fun to make, and it's great to know you all had just as much fun watching it. This Tyler video was honestly even more fun to make, so if you want me to take a look at any other artists like this, leave a like, a comment, a subscribe, anything. Alright, let's cut to the chase. The way this goes is I am going to rank every single Tyler song, from worst to best, using data from different parts of the fanbase, and rating them out of 5. This time, I once again took Rate Your Music, Music Board, and Album of the Year scores on Tyler's albums to get a wide variety of ratings. Then I ranked them myself once again to make it personal. But this time, the two wildcard rankings were slightly different. Instead of Reddit, I used Tiermaker's ultimate tier list that took the average ranking of every user's personal tier list. I thought this would add an interesting dynamic, because usually the people's opinions on that website are... And also, I used this video by Sorcerer. His rankings were great and varied, and the video was dope, so big shout out. Then, I put them all into a spreadsheet, I used this formula, and I checked out the results. Next, let's get a couple things out of the way. First, I am a big Tyler fan, but you will hate some of my rankings. I have a large Flower Boy bias, so I apologize in advance. Next, I focused on the main mixtape, album, and single songs. This is basically my soft way of saying no Grinch songs on here. Also, this ranking is much more varied than the Kendrick video, as the rankings go from 1.7 at the bottom to 4.6 at the very top. This definitely made the list a lot more fun to make and react to, so I hope you all agree. Alright, let's get on with the ranking. First off, these tracks go from a 1.7 to a 3. Yikes, this one is rough. Easily one of the worst strictly shock value songs. It doesn't help that it just sounds like all the worst parts of this era. It feels like a bunch of friends in 2009 got together to record a song over the worst beat they could find. Oh, that's exactly what this is. It does give it a little bit of charm going back, but it's not exactly listenable. A very difficult listen. So glad that Tyler got out of this era. The first half sonically is honestly not even terrible. On the right day, I actually like the production of this song. The rest of the song, though, is typical shock value stuff. The old Tyler flow is very prevalent here. Definitely not the best, but a lot worse in this era of Tyler. Falls into these same pitfalls as all of the first 3 albums do, but generally pretty mid, not offensively terrible, pretty decent. A fun instrumental track, but probably the worst of the interlude style tracks from Tyler. The seeds of what to come are definitely on this track. I actually kind of like Window. I think it's way too long, but the Odd Future Posse cut is kind of cool. I think the production is kind of interesting, but the rest of Sandwiches is just forgettable. Short, sweet, yet not very good. Run is definitely the worst on Cherry Bomb in my opinion. There's plenty more of Tyler's first 2 albums to go down here. This one just feels like another Tyler shock value track, although I do hear people sing its praises more than I would expect. One of those you either hate or think is underrated. I think the second half of this track is a lot of fun. Kind of feels like the inspiration to Brockhampton. There are definitely songs worse than this one in Tyler's catalog, so I think Trashwang should be a little bit higher. Radicals is really only notable because of that classic random disclaimer. Such a goofy song. Boring, in my opinion. I know there's some golden defenders out there, but it really never clicked with me. Feels like every other mid song from this time in his career. A divisive song from Cherry Bomb. The title track has an interesting energy, but it ends up being a bit too messy, and honestly that mixing is a bit rough. Weird song, quintessential old Tyler, appropriate ranking. Actually a pretty good one. Honestly, I think that this mixtape is more consistent and honestly better than Goblin. Tron Cat. Definitely an iconic track in Tyler's discography, but I don't really think anyone returns to it seriously. Next up, all of these songs go from a 3 to a 3.5. A little bit too slow for me, kinda gets forgettable. I like the placement of it. Everything Must Go is just an interlude. I can't believe someone rated it a 3.65. Nightmare's production is okay, pretty forgettable once again. It seems like the consensus is that this is one of the better tracks on Goblin, so I think it should be a bit higher. Another interlude. I think the background music is pretty good, and I like Tyler's rant. Way too long, but I recognize its iconicity. Not a terrible track. I think that Analog is better than it gets credit for, although it is, again, one of those shock value songs. Should be a bit higher, though, in my opinion. Another interlude. This one is the shortest, so it's probably my least favorite. Interlude ranking when? I think the production on this track is super underrated. This is where the best of this era of Tyler comes from, when his aggressive bars come over a laid-back, simple beat. I really like this interlude, on the other hand. Very sweet and genuine, but again, it is just an interlude. I'm going to agree with the data that this is one of the better songs on this mixtape. I love the laid-back production. Again, that's really what he did best at this time. I like this track. It feels like the perfect mix between Wolf and Flower Boy that the best parts of Cherry Bomb needed to be. It should be a bit higher. Better than I remembered, but it peaks at about the same level as most of this mixtape does. VCR has a special place in my heart strictly because of nostalgia. Again, Tyler's shock value bars are what they are. Another very sweet interlude, but one of my favorites. Definitely a perfect bridge between the two songs that it comes between. Parking Lot has a bit too similar of a flow to his first two projects, so it gets a bit forgettable. I do like the outro and the foreshadowing of the sounds in Rusty. It's an appropriate ranking. I really never liked 7 all too much. It looks like it's a bit more popular among fans than I thought, which is honestly a little surprising. Schoolboy Q goes off on this track, which makes it a very fun one. The beat is simple enough to get the job done. Higher than I expected Pigs to be. It feels like a mix of the best of the first two mixtapes, and refined a little bit. However, it kind of makes me loop this song in with those two mixtapes, which kind of makes it get lost in my head. Kind of makes it fall down the Wolf track list for me. Some of the most interesting production on this mixtape. I may not like it as much as some do, but I do respect it. This is where it gets really interesting. These tracks go from 3.5 all the way up till 4. After those synths kick in, Pilot gets pretty good, low-key a sleeper. Wolf is a great intro, but not entirely a full song to me, which is why I ranked it relatively low. I think Buffalo is good, just not as good as the best of Cherry Bomb. It falls relatively in the middle for me, good ranking. The first actual song from Flower Boy. I know that people always say that this is the weakest on Flower Boy, but it's still really good. Wheezy works really well on that spacey beat. Tree Home is honestly way too low. A real sleeper. It needs to be way higher. Peach Fuzz has a great vibe, but it's never been the most memorable of the singles to me. Super chill track that's a bit too chill for me. I think there are definitely better moments on Wolf. I recognize how fun Domo 23 is, but it was never my favorite. When I go back to Wolf, this isn't really one of the tracks I'm dying to hear. 435 is just long enough to make an impression, but not too long to where the beat gets boring. Works perfectly. I personally love this as an outro, but I know a lot of people overlook it. It gives me huge Steve Lacy and the internet vibes. Earl Sweatshirt on this track is great. The energy he brings to his bars is infectious. I can't believe this dude was only 15 when this came out. Jamba is a really fun track, very nostalgic to me as it's the first real song from Wolf. It grew off of me a bit, but that beat is so catchy, even with that sample. The first track from Call Me If You Get Lost on the list is almost in the top half. Love the use of the West Side Gun beat, works as a good intro. I wouldn't say it's the weakest on this album. This is the weakest on that album in my opinion. Even on first listen I wasn't too much of a fan. I've never really been a 42 Doug guy, and the trumpets get a bit tiring. Odd Toddlers is a classic. That sample is pure gold. I love his flow on here, it's such vintage Tyler. I really think it should be higher. I am a proud defender of this song. If it has no fans, I have sadly passed away. It reminds me of Pink Floyd in a weird way. I get why it's this low, but I personally love it. Good track, but definitely lives up to its demo title. Tyler's flow has got that feature energy, if you know what I mean. Excellent chill track. Kali Uchis is just such a gem. Here's my hot take, this is my favorite collab between these two. I know Death Camp has a lot of fans, but it's just a little too messy for me. The main guitar beat never really appealed to me. I get why it's loved though, I still think it's a good track. Slater is the lowest track that I rated a 5 by far. Like I've been saying all video, old Tyler does best on these laid back beats. His wordplay is a lot of fun, and that outro is beautiful. Pretty good, it definitely feels like a throwaway track, but it is still good fun. Shout out to Molly, man, I can't believe it beat 50 other songs, but I'm glad it did. I'd say this is probably the weakest on Flower Boy in my opinion, and I still almost rated it a 4. Yes, my bias is showing. Probably a lot of our first introduction to Tizo Touchdown. I love the cinematic build-up on the first half of the track, great energy, and I think it should be a little higher. I love this track, one of my favorites from the very first time of listening to Wolf. The subtle piano in the background along with the sample work beautifully together. Also one of the few times you'll hear me praise the deep voice modulator. I love the rising energy to this track. It feels like you're marching through life with a smile on your face. Cute track. Two-seater has a lot of different parts to it that I think all work together pretty well. Plus, give a shout out to Aaron Shaw on the sax. Modern Jazz is alive and well. This is the lowest non-interlude track from Igor, which is crazy that it's all the way at 52. I don't think it's the weakest on that album personally. I like the delivery and that frantic vibe. A great three-parter that doesn't need to be a three-parter. Beamer over Party Isn't over Campfire is the only valid ranking. Perfect introduction to Tyler at this point in time, and also the highest from this mixtape. Maybe a bit of nostalgia factor, but a lot of fun. I used to like this song a lot more, but I think it grew off of me a little bit. What's an old Tyler album without a creepy song though? Although this is one of the more palatable ones. It sounds beautiful. Not the most memorable from the estate sale, but not too bad either. Definitely should be some more tracks above it though. What a crazy beat. Shout out to Blarf. Domo's verse goes off too, and a great reunion between the two. Next up, we're going all the way to the top 10. These tracks go from a 4.0 to almost 4.5. Safari is a great and triumphant outro that works extremely well in the context of the album. Probably not my most revisited, but a lot of fun. Infectiously sweet song. Such a bubbly energy. I'd love this as the technical closer. If Potato Salad didn't exist, this would probably be my favorite Tyler single. A crazy flow. I remember listening to this one on repeat when it first dropped. A lot of fun. Kinda forgettable to me. I didn't really fall in love with most of the tracks from the estate sale like most people did though. I think it should be a little bit lower. I remember that this track got its boost in popularity from TikTok a while ago, and I think it deserved its time in the spotlight. A cute little track that feels very authentically Tyler. Great storytelling here. Great track to sit back and relax to. I know some people claim it's too long, but they just don't feel the vibe. Lone is a fantastic outro. There are very few Tyler tracks that have this kind of sound, so I think it really should be appreciated more. Is there ever a bad Tyler and Rocky track? This one keeps the same amount of fun that all their collabs do. Great song. Speaking of fun, I Ain't Got Time is full of it. That breakdown on the second half is so dope. Yonkers, honestly, is probably rated this high for nostalgia. As much as I do like this song, I'm sure part of it is the nostalgia goggles. I don't go back to it all too much. I think in relative to the rest of this album, Lumberjack feels a little forgettable, which is crazy because I loved this track when it first dropped as a single. I don't trust anyone who doesn't like 48. Another example of just how well Tyler's voice and delivery can balance out these more laid-back beats. Such a good song. One of the singles released before Flower Boy, Rocky and Tyler established their amazing connection here. This song has a great beat and some of Tyler's more interesting lyrics. Really good. What a fantastic intro. The wordplay and the flow is amazing, same with the feature. Seeing this at only 32 is kind of crazy, but I guess I still get it. That's how good the upper half of Tyler's discography is. I really liked this song when it first came out, but it has fallen off for me a little bit since. Still a lot of fun. Okay, can we give this track its flowers? This is easily my favorite Tyler song from his first 3 albums. Everything about it is so good. Way to channel his anger and energy into an amazingly performed track. Both features do their thing on it too. I always have and I always will love Rusty. This might be a hot take, but I always felt like this was the weakest on Igor. I like the energy, but it felt more like a Diet New Magic Wand to me. The beat on Heaven to Me is crazy. I feel like this song doesn't get talked about enough. Another great storytelling track. A classic Tyler track too. I'm glad it ranked this high. These synths on Where This Flower Blooms are amazing. And it's another amazing Frank and Tyler song. Establishes the indie sound that this album really embraces very well. Definite gem. Puppet is an excellent use of a feature, using it as more of an instrument than a verse. Love the outro on here too. Iconic Tyler track. This is such a good collaboration that it made everyone want a whole album from them. Still waiting for Wang Sap to this day. A short and fun track. Uzi's flow on it is crazy. Great song. Corso is honestly one of the more forgettable tracks on this album for me. It's a great braggadocious track though. It builds the energy that keeps going through the first 5 songs on the album, but on its own I don't think it stands out. One of the most impressive tracks on Igor for me. These synths are just insanity. This track can just trap you in its sound. It really surrounds you. If you have this album on vinyl, which if you're watching this you probably do, invest in a good surround sound setup and go to a new world on this track. Another song I will defend until I die. November is a great way to tie the themes of Flower Boy together. Love the outro and Tyler's flow throughout. One of my favorites on this album. Lil Wayne's verse is just so good. I'm surprised to see it as high as the top 20, but I'm definitely not disappointed. One of the definite standout tracks from Wolf. The production is great and just drives home the emotions on the track. Pharrell is a great way to tie it all together, and the elements of the production introduced on the latter half are beautiful. Igor's theme all the way at 17, you'd love to see it. Another one from Igor that's extremely impressive. The first time listening, I was immediately hooked. Back when I thought I had to be different, I even said this was my favorite from the album. Garden Shed is my personal favorite from Flower Boy. A personal and emotionally vulnerable song with a beautiful atmosphere. Works with the sound palette of this record so well. Boredom is such a chill track. The outro is especially great. I wouldn't put it over Garden Shed, but I really do think it's great. It's hilarious that this song is on the same album as, honestly, half the songs as Goblin. Besides Yonkers, the next Goblin song is all the way at 87. I'm so glad it got ranked as high as it did. I can't even begin to express how much I love this song. Frank's legendary verse is just the best. One of the catchiest songs on Igor. Excellent mix of rapping and the synthwave sounds that he's been developing all over this album. Honestly, I think 13 is just a bit too high. Everyone talks about how Tyler is so good that he can make even Young Boy sound good, so I gotta give this track its flowers for that. Aside from that, it's a gorgeous song all around. The highest Cherry Bomb song by far, just barely doesn't make the top 10. Such a cinematic track, it feels like the climactic celebration for all that Tyler did up to this point. And finally, here is the top 10. Number 1 is ranked a 4.6. Starting off the top 10, this beautiful two-parter is probably my favorite on this album. Both halves feel so different, yet work so well together, and the transition between them is just too good. It's one of those songs you just can't help but dance to. The best song that samples the song Bound. Truly an amazing track. I struggle to find the words to describe it. I know this is a popular choice for the best on Igor, so you probably understand just how good it is. The Okay Okay La 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 song makes the top 10. Kaliuchis is great as always, but I do think that there are better tracks on Flower Boy. Dare I say, overrated. Earthquake blew my mind when I first heard it. That Cardi feature had me floating from day one. Everyone and their mother has heard this song before, and honestly for good reason. The song that Tyler says is his favorite, and honestly it's not even top 5 Igor. The energy on this track is crazy though. I love how manic it is. I'm just honestly personally more of a fan of the calmer tracks on Igor. And Are We Still Friends is a perfect example of one of those. A cinematic and straight up beautiful outro, perfect use of the sample, perfect use of the synths, and a perfect use of his voice. At number 4 we have Sorry Not Sorry, and I always liked this song, but just clearly not as much as everyone else did. I am very surprised it's the highest ranked Call Me If You Get Lost track. Would I go as far as to call it number 4? I don't think so, but it is really good. I also really like that music video. I am so happy that Answer is number 3 here. One of Tyler's most heartbreakingly honest tracks from this era. It holds up even when compared to his newest material. Those heartbroken guitars on the intro are just beautiful. So glad it got to number 3. I became a Tyler fan when this song came out, but before Flower Boy did. This song got me to catch up on all the Odd Future lore, his past discography, and wonder why it was so different. For being the song that got me to fall in love with Tyler's music, I gotta respect it for being number 2. An awesome two-parter that combines everything that Flower Boy does best and puts it into one track. Great vibes, great rapping performance, beautiful production, perfect track. And finally at number 1 we have Gone Gone / Thank You. I did always claim this to be my favorite Tyler song, and I completely agree that it should be all the way up here. There isn't a single part that lacks on this song. The lyrics, the flow, the production, and of course it's another classic two-parter from Tyler. Excellent song that deserves all the praise it gets, and I'm glad it ended up as number 1.